The winter wind screamed like a wounded beast through the high Arizona timberland as dusk pressed down on the world. Elias Granger stood alone beside the crackling fire in his one-room cabin, listening to the storm pummel the mountainside. Snow had swallowed the trees and sky alike, making the world outside a white void. He was used to silence. Years of trapping and hunting had taught him how to live without human company. The only sounds he expected were a wolf's distant howl or the snap of pine under frost. Then came the knock. No, not a knock, but a frantic pounding. It startled him so deeply he nearly dropped the tin cup in his hand. Nobody ever came here, not in winter, and certainly not in a storm. For a long breath he stood frozen, hand hovering above his rifle. His heart thudded hard against his ribs while the wind shrieked around the cabin walls like spirits trying to break through. He lifted the iron latch and pulled open the door. What stood there in the swirling snow were two young Apache women, nearly collapsing, wrapped in shredded hides that barely covered their shivering bodies. Their hair was plastered to their faces with ice, and their feet, bare blue from cold, sunk into the snow like stones. One tried to speak first, lips quivering, voice barely a thread of sound. Please, cold, shelter. They were enemies, at least by the world's rules. White men did not take in Apache, not if they wanted to live. Elias knew well that hiding them, even sheltering them, could be a death sentence. But the sight of them, frozen, starved, terrified, cut deeper than fear. He couldn't shut the door on them. Something old, something human, moved his hand before his mind could refuse. He gathered them both up, their bodies light as twigs, and carried them inside. The door slammed shut against the storm. He laid them near the fire, wrapped them in wool blankets, rubbed warmth back into their frozen hands. He poured water, spooned broth past cracked lips. As the night stretched long, he sat on the floor between them, listening to their strained breathing and the crackle of the logs. He didn't sleep, not once, because he knew at dawn, when the storm cleared, everything might change. He whispered only to the flames, "Lord, don't let me regret this." Outside, snow kept falling, burying every track that led to his door. The 3 days that followed passed in a haze of smoke, fever, and tension. Elias hardly left the women's side, though he knew the danger grew with every hour they remained under his roof. He had learned to survive through silence and instinct, yet now silence felt like a weight pressing on his chest. Tala, the stronger of the two, recovered quickly. Her dark eyes never stopped tracking his every move, sharp and wary like a hawk watching a trespasser on its land. Elias could sense she was ready to strike if he so much as breathed wrong. She spoke only fragments at first, her voice rough from cold and exhaustion. "We escaped. Enemy tribe, we run. 3 days. Her hand rested always on the small knife she carried, even when shivering beneath his blankets. Naya was a different story. Fever burned in her cheeks, sweat sliding down her temples as she mumbled words in Apache that Elias couldn't understand. She barely had the strength to lift her head. Elias made willow bark tea, crushing it beneath his knife, mixing it carefully into water before pressing it to her lips. She drank in weak swallows, coughing. But the flush of fever refused to leave her for 2 long nights. Elias placed his palm against her forehead, burning hot, and worry clawed at him. He had seen men die of fever on battlefields during the war. Strong men laid low by sickness faster than any bullet. He feared she, small and fragile, might slip away. Each time he approached, Tara's glare demanded his caution. He spoke low, steady, respectful. "I mean no harm. She needs time. If she rests, she'll live." He didn't know if she understood every word, but something softened in her expression, just slightly each time. Naya's breathing steadied. By the morning of the 3rd day, Naya finally opened her eyes. She looked around the cabin slowly, confusion giving way to realization. She was alive. Her cracked lips trembled before she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Thank you." Elias only nodded, unsure how to respond. But just as relief settled into his bones, Ala's attention snapped toward the frosted window. She rose slowly, shoulders tense, face gone white. Elias held his breath, listening, and then he heard it. Hoofbeats. Not one, not two. Dozens. A low, rhythmic thunder rolling across the frozen earth. Elias reached for his rifle, pushed the cabin door open, and the cold bit at his skin. Down the ridge, shadows emerged, an army on horseback, bows and rifles ready. 30 Apache warriors, encircling his home like a tightening noose. His heart dropped to his boots. Their presence answered his fear. He had saved 2 lives, and now his own sat in the balance. The cabin felt smaller than a coffin once the warriors surrounded it. Elias stepped out slowly, rifle hanging loosely in his grip, not raised, not threatening. Just present the way a wounded animal bares its teeth. Snow crunched under his boots, the cold wind slicing across his face as he stared down at the semicircle of mounted Apache watching him. Their horses snorted steam into the air, hooves shifting impatiently, bodies tense as drawn bowstrings. The man at the front wore a headdress of raven feathers, beads clinking softly against his chest. His eyes were sharp as flint. Chief Red Elk, Elias, had heard his name whispered in trading posts and saloons, usually followed by stories of bodies hung from cottonwoods and riders, never seen again. "You have our daughters," the chief declared, voice deep as thunder. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a warning, and a sentence all at once. Elias didn't answer, because words felt like sparks in a powder keg. Instead, it was Tala who stepped out of the cabin beside him, shoulders squared, jaw set. She spoke in rapid Apache, her voice rising and falling like a storm whipping through branches. Elias couldn't understand the words, but he read the emotion: anger, defiance, truth, and something softer beneath. Like gratitude she refused to show. Naya followed slowly, leaning against the doorframe, weak but alive. The warrior's hard gazes flickered, seeing her breath, her trembling chest, proof of life preserved. Minutes stretched like rope pulled too tight. The chief finally dismounted, boots hitting the snow with the solidity of judgment. He approached Elias, coming close enough that Elias could smell smoke and sage on his skin. "You sheltered them," Chief Red Elk said, slower now, letting the meaning settle. "You saved her life. That demands repayment." For the first time, Elias spoke, voice steady, though his stomach churned. "I didn't save them for reward. I saved them because they were dying." The chief's gaze narrowed, not in anger but in measuring. He looked at Tala and Naya, then at Elias again, and his next words struck like an axe to a frozen trunk. "Among our people, a man who takes a woman into his shelter, it takes her into his honor. You took 2. So now a debt stands. You must choose, marry ones or both. Refuse and death will wipe away dishonor." The warriors tightened their grips on their weapons, as if the air itself awaited Elias's breath. Elias's thoughts spun. Marriage? To strangers? To women who came close to dying on his floor? It sounded like madness, yet the stakes were iron and blood. Tala's chin lifted, fiercely proud. Naya's eyes lowered, cheeks flushed. Not with fever this time, but something more vulnerable. Night crept slowly across the mountains, shadows swallowing the valley as a ceremonial fire began to burn outside. The drums started, a slow heartbeat against the snow. Elias returned inside the cabin alone. He sat by the dying embers and pressed a hand over his face. Lord. Dawn did not come softly that morning. It crawled over the mountains like a weary traveler, its pale light pushing aside darkness inch by inch, revealing the world beneath a new coat of powdered snow. Elias had not slept. He sat in his chair by the ashes of last night's fire, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands as though they might offer him an answer. Every few minutes, his gaze drifted to the closed door. Beyond it stood a tribe ready to end him, or bind him forever. When he finally rose, his bones felt older than the hills. He opened the door to the cold, letting the wind bite at him. A reminder that life was sharp and never gentle. Tala and Naya stood outside already. They must have heard the rustling of warriors, setting campfires, sharpening blades, preparing whatever ceremony fate would call for. Tala's expression was unreadable stone, but her eyes, dark as midnight, watched him with an intensity that made him feel seen in a way no one had in years. Naya, beside her, wrapped in a fur they must have brought for her, looked nervous, hands clasped together to hide the trembling. The warriors gathered in a wide half-circle. Chief Red Elk stepped forward, carrying the weight of tradition like a mantle. His voice rose over the wind, calm yet edged with something ancient. A choice stands before you, Elias Granger. You sheltered 2 daughters of our blood. The mountains saw it. The spirits watched it. Their honor was placed in your hands. Now you must speak your truth. Elias swallowed hard. His heart beat so loud he wondered if they heard it. He looked at Tala, proud, fierce, a woman sharpened by survival, and then at Naya, gentle, soft, fragile yet strong for having lived through death's shadow. Words formed inside him only because silence would kill them all. I will not choose one, he began, voice hoarse. I will not break either of them. I will honor both, if it is their wish. Not because I am forced, not because I fear death. He paused, meeting the chief's eyes. But because no man should take what isn't freely given. There was a long, breathless stillness. Snowflakes drifted lazily between them, like time itself held its breath. Then Tala stepped forward, her chin lifted. I walk with you, she said, her English rough but clear. If you respect our ways. Naya added softly, I stay too. I wish it. The chief nodded, and the warriors released the tension in their bows and rifles as if exhaling one long-held breath. A ceremony began, not with a priest or scripture, but with pine smoke, eagle feathers, and drums that echoed across the valley like the heartbeat of the earth. Feathers were tied into Elias's hair. Fur was placed on his shoulders. Tala's hand rested at his right, Naya's at his left. By midday, the cabin, once a lonely fortress, felt full enough to overflow. Laughter began to replace silence. The scent of stew replaced the cold smell of wood and snow. And though danger waited beyond the trees,